This was the first Testify video. No, this is the first and only Testify video that I've seen, but it made me want to watch more. So I'll go ahead and let's watch this.
Quran 11:1 says, "This is a book whose verses give clear instructions explained by a wise, knowledgeable Lord." The Quran claims to be clear, decisive, and perfectly constructed. But the true Quran is in Arabic, so how can we know? Far from being a problem, we can use translations to test the Quran's claims. If the Quran really is clear and decisive, then devoted Muslims who translate the Quran into English should give equivalent translations. Not identical words, of course, but the same idea. If different translators describe different ideas, then the meaning of the Quran can't be clear. For example, two translators say, "My cat needs a bath," and "My cat needs to be washed," then that's fine. But if they say, "My cat needs a bath," and "My cat likes to be left alone," then we would wonder why the translators are so confused. If many translators differ like this, there must be something unclear about the original. In particular, moral guidance should be the most clear and decisive. So let's have a close look at a moral command in the Quran. At IslamAwakened.com, there are 36 generally accepted translations. We'll use this sample. Turn to Quran 434. Here's the first translation.
Hey, you could run this exact same argument with multiple Quran verses.
There are a lot of them. Yeah, I mean, the other day I was running the Islamic dilemma on somebody, and they were like, "Oh, well, no, you don't judge by the Quran, right? It's just, verse 48 says it's the criterion." And I'm like, well, there's like a bunch of other translations that say like guardian or preserver or all these other things. Criterion and guardian, that's really different, dude.
Yep.
And so like that's not really going to work. And it's like, why are they translating it differently? Is it because they're trying to preserve their Islamic narrative, or, you know, what's going on? And so, why should I trust any English translation of the Quran if you guys are perfectly fine with switching up to theology?
And that one is especially difficult for them because it's not a situation where you could just look up the meaning of the word. You can go back to their earliest commentators, and they all disagreed about what the word meant. And so the translating it as a criterion or something like that, that's a minority. That's a minority position. Mm-hmm. All the other translations all like support our position, right? It's the Quran is like a guardian and so on, watching over the previous scriptures and so on. Especially if you read it in context. If you read it in context, it's, how is the Quran a guardian over the other scriptures? Well, when Jews or Christians say, we don't want to follow our scriptures, the Quran says, no, you go back and follow your scriptures. That's the word of God. And that's how the Quran is guarding these earlier scriptures. And then Muslims go with criterion, and then they give it the exact opposite meaning of what it means in the context, that the Quran is condemning these earlier scriptures and so on. So yeah, that is an issue. But I mean, yeah, so you can find dozens of translations of that verse that give you different meanings, and they'll like fixate on the one that they can twist into agreeing with their position. And it's just, I don't know, it's pathetic. That's what you get from the clear Quran. But unlike Surah 4 verse 34. So yeah, you just pointed out that one. 65:4 would be another perfect one, because if the Quran's either clear, if the Quran is clear, then you've got 14 centuries of Muslims who all interpreted that verse in the same way, namely that you can have sex with prepubescent girls. The alternative is that they all got it wrong. The Quran's hopelessly unclear. So it's evil or unclear once again. Anyway, so yeah, you could actually take the same script and just plug in different verses and run this script 20 different times from the Quran.
Yeah, I mean, you're already giving me devious ideas. I think the 65:4 is would be genius. I will have to exploit that.
And it's easy to toss the commentaries right up on the screen. They all interpret it this way. Ibn Abbas, Ibn Kathir, the two Jalals, Tabari, dozens and dozens of the most famous Islamic commentators all interpreted the same way. You've even got Mohammad Hijab saying that it's clearly talking about sex with prepubescent girls. He says you can't go around that.
If you look just at the Quran, you will get the indication that you can have sexual intercourse with a 5-year-old. The reason why it's haram to have sexual intercourse with a 5-year-old is not found in the Quran at all. If you just read the Quran, it is halal. It would be halal to have sexual intercourse with a 5-year-old. Chapter 65, verse 4.
And so, for
this is the beauty of Islam.
It's the beauty of Islam. But it's funny because if you go to a regular Muslim who's not familiar with this stuff, he'll instantly say, "That's not what it means. It means something else."
No, they'll freak out. Yeah.
And so, yep, you're stuck, buddy. You're stuck. Now you're saying that the Quran is not clear. So unclear. It is a weird situation that, like, they can brag about their book being clear and then simultaneously say that 14 centuries of their greatest scholars all completely misinterpreted the verses.
I mean, yeah, obviously it's super clear. Clear as the proverbial mud. So.
All right, so you're going with Surah 4, verse 34 for this version. Let's see.
At the top of the page, men shall take full care of women with the bounties which God has bestowed more abundantly on the former than on the latter, and with what they may spend out of their possessions. And the righteous women are the truly devout ones, who guard the intimacy which God has ordained to be guarded. And for those women whose ill will you have reason to fear, admonish them first, then leave them alone in bed, then beat them. And if thereupon you pay heed, do not seek to harm them. Behold, God is indeed most high great. Anything that is in some kind of bracket has been added by the translator. If it's not in the Arabic, then we'll ignore it because the Arabic Quran is the real Quran. So let's focus on this. What is the third command for dealing with a woman whose ill will you have reason to fear? This translation says beat them. Is the Arabic so clear and decisive though? Let's take a look at some other translations to see. Of the 36 translations, 15 say to beat your wife. That's 42%. That's less than 50, so let's look at the other options. 5 translations say to strike your wife. 2 say to hit your wife. 1 says to spank your wife. 1 says to scourge your wife. 1 says to apply force to your wife. It says a minimum of force, but the word minimum is not in the Arabic text. There are no further instructions. Further, 2 translations...
Why'd you rudely add those sound effects?
I just, you just gotta appeal to people's emotions a little bit there, and so, I mean, it's a minimum amount of force, so it really should feel like a flicking sound against their ear or something like that, right? And so I guess they're going to want to say that the minimum amount of force is going to come from some hadith or something. But if they want to go to the hadith and go, no, like the hadiths are clear, it's a minimum amount of force, then let's just talk about the lady with the green skin and Aisha saying that women are treated terribly in Islam and they suffer more than any other women. And let's talk about Muhammad punching her in the chest and Bukhari hitting her and all kinds of other stuff too.
Yeah. If you make it before I do, you can make it. But I was planning on responding to who was it? Lily J. I'm saying that because
ChatGPT.
Yeah, I'm saying that because you've made some responses to Lily J. And it's fun responding to Lily J because it's super easy because she says the dumbest stuff. There's no preparation required because it's stuff that we were refuting 15 years ago over and over again before the Dawa guys gave up on those arguments. But then Lily J's bringing it back. She's bringing back the same stupid arguments. But
she had a scientific miracle one today.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I messaged Inspiring Philosophy. I was like, dude, she makes it too easy not to respond with these using the same arguments that, we destroyed in debates years ago. But what was that one? Oh yeah, she was saying something about women's rights in Islam and Islam treats women better and stuff. And I just wanted to title it like Lily J versus Aisha on women in Islam. And so Lily J says, no, women have it better. And then, Aisha, the mother of the faithful, Muhammad's wife, she says Muslim women are treated worse than pagan women, than any other women in the world. So who do we believe? And just, you could kind of flip it back to her. Lily J, tell us and tell your audience, who is a greater authority on women in Islam? You or the mother of the faithful? Tell us. We'd love to know because I'd like to see if her narcissism takes over. Well, I am.
Yeah, she said like none of his marriages were about lust in that video. And I was just like, Lily, like you really, this isn't slow pitch softball now. You're just sticking it on the tee. Like You know, do we need to go through the scraping of the semen and all that other stuff?
Look, narrated Aisha, I used to wash the semen off the clothes of the Prophet, and even then I used to notice one or more spots in them. Aisha reported, I used to rub off the semen from the clothes of the Messenger of Allah. He would then pray in it. I remember when I found semen on the garment of the Messenger of Allah and scratched it off. She's scratching off the semen, she's scraping off the semen, she's rubbing off the semen, she's washing off the semen. Even then she sees more as he's going to the mosque to hug it out with his bros. I would want a restraining order against this guy to keep him far away from me.
Like, why, how are these not about lust? Like, no, I just took my adopted son's wife because, you know, wasn't about lust at all. I just needed to abolish adoption.
I saw her practically naked, and that's when it really occurred to Allah that he needs to abolish adoption. And then everyone told me how hot Sophia was, and I was like, oh, truly she must be a noble woman whose husband we just tortured and killed.
I don't know what's going on, man. It's a sad state of dialogue.
Wild stuff.
Say to discipline or chastise your wife with no further instructions in the Quran, the method seems up to you. We can count those as consistent with beating. That's a total of 27 out of 36 translations, or 75%, that say to beat, scourge, beat, discipline, hit, beat, strike, 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 beat, strike, hit, beat, chastise, spank, apply force, beat your wife. If they were all like this, then the command of the Quran would be clear and decisive about beating your wife. To be clear, there are no further instructions about how to beat your wife. There's nothing.
Yeah, I have to point out, I mean, we could check out the clip if we wanted to. We probably won't. But Hijab, in the famous video where he was explaining that if you're a Quran-only Muslim and you don't have the Hadith to at least suggest that you might want to pause consummating the marriage with a child bride. In that video, he was saying that if you just go with the Quran, you'll conclude that you can have sex with a 5-year-old. You go to the Hadith and say, okay, Muhammad waited a couple extra years for something. So what's he waiting for? And he even clarifies, he says, not puberty. There's no requirement for puberty. So, but in that same video, he's pointing out that the word for strike here, or beat, is the same word that's used in other contexts as like striking at the necks of the unbelievers. So he said, if you don't go outside the Quran to give you some regulations on this, you'd conclude you can chop your wife's head off for being disobedient to you. And so this is like, it's hijab. I mean, keep in mind, you can make a follow-up to this talking about how Mohammed Hijab agrees with you completely.
The Quran 4:34, it says, وَضْرِبُهُنَّ. If we want to take your approach to the Quran, which is that you don't have the Sunnah next to it, we know the Prophet never touched his wife in that way. We know we don't advocate hitting women and stuff like that, yeah? However, if I was a Quran alone, wallahi, I'll be honest with you, I would look at the Quran. If you read the Quran just like that, without reference to the Sunnah, to the way of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that word becomes open to interpretation. A man now, a husband, can decide, okay, well, so like a nice man like you will say, no, this means strike a parable, yeah? Strike a parable. But this guy, okay, maybe not you, right? or someone like me, or some bad guy, right? Who's got more aggressive tendencies. Let's look at that word, daraba. Same word that's used for striving. I'm going to do that on my wife. Now the thing is, what restricts that man? Nothing restricts that man as the Quran alone. Why? Because that man now has absolute ability and right to interpret and extrapolate from that verse whatever he wants.
Right? Because what's Hijab saying? The Quran is hopelessly unclear. You have to go outside of the Quran to get something that makes sense of these verses. And so it's like, it's just amazing because when he says it, it's as good as gold. When you say it, you'll be an enemy of Islam. How dare you say this? You guys are saying exactly the same thing. The Quran is not clear.
I did have a Muslim say this is a Quranist argument, or like this is an argument against Quranism. I'm like, and then he tried to quote that hadith, and I'm like, but what about these other 5 hadith that we just kind of already mentioned? And so that's not really making it a whole lot better. But yeah.
So thank you for the cosign, Mohammed Hijab. Thank you for the cosign on this entire video and argument.
The Arabic about a last resort, or gently, or not in their faces, or even if necessary, or with a toothbrush. It just says beat your wife. However, they don't all agree that you should beat your wife.
The toothbrush I had to throw in there, so
I'm looking at your emoji with the black eye. I didn't notice it when I saw it the first time.
Oh, okay.
7 translations say that you should separate, turn away, go away from them, depart, or withdraw. That's very different. By a strange coincidence, all 7 translations were created in the 21st century. One translation says to keep admonishing your wife, which means only to use words. That's very different.
Yeah, you're beating her with words.
That's right.
Ahmed Ali says go to bed with him. That seems like wishful thinking. Nice try, Ahmed. So, is the Quran clear and decisive? There are 3 options. Number 1, the Quran is not clear and decisive. We don't know whether the original Arabic Quran is trying to command you to beat your wife, or to separate from her, or something else. That's why the translations are so divided. So, the Quran's claim to be clear and decisive is false. Number 2, the Quran is clear and decisive. You should beat your wife if you have any reason to fear her ill will. In that case, other translations show that devout Muslims today are perfectly okay with mistranslating the Quran to make it more acceptable to 21st century audiences. Why should I trust any Muslim translation of the Quran if Muslims are perfectly okay with twisting the meaning? Number 3, the Quran is clear and decisive. You should separate from your wife if you have any reason to fear her ill will, but that creates a problem. If the Quran is clear and decisive, where did almost every translator before the 21st century get the idea that you should beat your wife? In any case, it should be clear that relying on the Quran for moral guidance is a terrible idea. If it's not clear, that's bad. And if it is clear, that's even worse.
Nice. Powerful stuff.